digest it and absorb it. I was shocked as anyone else.
Professor Hassan Astaneh is one of the few scientists actually carrying out analysis of the twisted remains that lie in the scrapyard in New Jersey. He has been studying the condition of the steel columns in an attempt to find out what the collapse mechanism could have been. There are several clues that immediately point to a very specific and unusual scenario.
What you see here is actually very critical, very, very important. Perhaps this is the most important piece I have found so far. This piece comes from most likely Tower 2, where the plane went in and exploded. This is the inside face of back columns. So plane went in, exploded right here, and the explosion hit this surface. What you see here is, first of all, a bend that is due to explosion, but more importantly, this is a signature of explosion here. This has happened due to explosive material hitting this column and making that bulge. So this is the floor where explosion happened. And the windows are blown away, everything is burned, even fireproofing on this floor is burned and glazed to the steel.
The fireproofing in the World Trade Center was sprayed on, a dry, fragile material made of mineral fibers. Designed to protect the steel from heat, it appears that it may have been blown away by the blasts from the impacts. Although every piece of steel in this scrapyard would have been treated, very little of it can be found.
This piece, as you can see, has been burned. You can see the smoke and the fire effect on it. You can see some fireproofing, but really not much of it is left. So you can see that when the building was burning, there was no fireproofing left.
The lack of fireproofing would have meant that the steel was extremely vulnerable to the heat from the kerosene. But what has intrigued the investigators above all is that it may have had a disastrous effect on one particular part of the structure, the support for the massive open-plan floors. The floor system was unusual for its time. Instead of the thick steel beams that are normally used, the floors were supported with lightweight structures called trusses. A steel deck was placed over them to form prefabricated panels, which were then hoisted into position. They were fastened at each end to brackets welded to the wall, and once in place, each floor was covered with a 4-inch layer of concrete. This system was one of the reasons why the towers could be built so quickly, since each floor was largely pre-assembled down on the ground. But the drawback with such lightweight trusses is that they can be very susceptible to fire.
There is no other construction technique that has killed more firefighters than trusses. We have a saying in the fire service: don't trust the truss. They fail during fire. For example, 40 years ago, the fire protection engineers told us that an unprotected steel truss will fail within 5 or 10 minutes of fire exposure.
Trusses are highly efficient. They're extremely strong for their weight. But because they're so light, they heat up very quickly in a fire. And unless they're well protected with fireproofing, they will start to bend and distort. With the fireproofing damaged or removed altogether, this was the first part to be affected by the inferno raging in the towers. This computer simulation done at MIT shows how heating the trusses would cause them to fail.
What the simulation shows is that the most likely, the weak point of the floor were the connections to the supports. And it might have started failing at those locations first. Either the external connection to the columns or the internal connection.
As the floors began to fail, the last terrible phase of the destruction started. For the efficiency of the design meant that with any major element removed, the whole structure would fall. The reason why is best demonstrated with a simple wooden model.
We have here two frame structures. Basically, these are the columns, and these are 3 floors. And I'm certain that we had fires, and these fires caused this floor basically to fail and drop onto the floors below, underneath. So once this floor was gone, we had a situation similar to this one here, where this intermediate floor disappeared, basically dropped. This changes dramatically the way in which the loads in the building are carried. Let me illustrate this by adding weights here to this structure. And this load again that I just added is transmitted through these columns all the way to the table. The important thing to understand is this floor does not carry any of this load. The only function of this floor is to connect the columns together, to tighten the columns together and prevent them from buckling.
The model on the left is able to take a very large amount of weight, but the one with the missing floor is only able to support a quarter of that amount before its columns twist and buckle, and it collapses. This is the mechanism that almost certainly caused the collapse of the World Trade Center. The fire destroying the floors that kept the walls standing. After burning for 53 minutes, the South Tower collapsed in 11 seconds. "30 minutes later, the North Tower crumbled. Once it was underway, nothing could stop it. By the time the tops of the buildings had fallen just the height of a single story, they had gathered enough momentum to smash each floor in turn, accelerating until all 500,000 tons hit the ground at 120 miles an hour.